Hi, this is Peter Schweizer, and welcome to the Drill Down. DOGE continues to make headlines. The Department of Government Efficiency is looking to save us tens of billions of dollars. But you know what? That's not the most valuable service they're performing. What DOGE is doing is uncovering massive political money laundering. And joining us here to talk about that is the co-host of this program, Eric Eggers. Eric, I'm sure you have a lot of experience with money laundering.
You know, I wish I did have a lot of experience with money laundering, because I think if you have experience with money laundering, that means you're good with money. Like, you have a lot of extra money.
You have a lot of money to launder. Okay.
I unfortunately have the opposite problem. I'm not saying I'm bad with money. I'm saying to promote this podcast, I took out an aggressive and expensive advertising schedule recently. Unfortunately, it was on the Joy Reid television show, and there's no takebacks. So see you later on that one.
Well, you know, DOGE is a really interesting phenomenon.
Yeah.
It's getting a lot of attention, a lot of focus. They're announcing, things that they've uncovered every single day. And there's also a little bit of pushback. You found this piece from Axios where they are, essentially saying, their proposed cuts are lots of drips of water in America's overflowing bucket of debt. And they go on to talk about the fact of how large the debt is, how large the deficit is, and what DOGE is looking at saving is tens of billions of dollars. So they're kind of saying this is not a big deal. And factually, they might be correct, but there are a lot of incredible details here, and it's not like you can avoid or should avoid cutting these areas.
Yeah, so I think the Axios article, the fact that Axios is even talking about our debt in the context of what DOGE is doing is significant, because it signals to me that we've at least been successful in shifting the conversation about how important it is to have some level of fiscal responsibility, regardless of what the MSNBC ad sales people tell you. So I'm old enough to remember when Mitt Romney ran for president, and the big issue was, oh my gosh, this debt, we can't keep doing this. Right. And some people are like, oh, it's a big deal. But not enough, because he lost significantly, right?
Yeah.
And all the other economists are like, it's fine, we'll just keep printing more money. And unfortunately, that's exactly what happened. And the Obama era came in, and then Trump took over, and maybe we started to take some steps towards fiscal responsibility. But then COVID happened, and as a previous podcast guest of ours has talked about, we printed something like 3 generations worth of wealth and infused into the economy. Yeah. And that money went to lots of different places. And that's the context I think we're in, where Elon Musk and these people are like, wait, we spent money on what?
Yeah, crazy stuff. We'll give you a couple of examples. Now, these are, again, small numbers, but still, it's outrageous that this money is being spent because, of course, taxpayers are digging in their pockets to give it to the federal government. $324,000 to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, a grant for increasing DEI programming for integrated pest management. Are they talking about are the pests being integrated, or are they talking about the people that are actually providing the pest services being integrated?
Listen, maybe you want to live in a world where only whites can manage pests. That's not me, okay? I believe in Dr. King's vision for pest management, and so $324,000 well spent, in my opinion.
Roger that. $3 million to the Education Department to write a report that shows that prior reports were not utilized by schools. The question is this report going to be utilized?
The question is, was it a diverse coalition of people that either read or didn't read those reports?
Right. The General Services Administration, with 13,000 employees, this is one of your favorites, 13,000 employees, they have 37,000 WinZip licenses. Mm-hmm. They have 19,000 training software subscriptions. Remember, their entire workforce is only 13,000, and they have 7,500 project management software seats for a division with 5,500 employees.
What that tells me is that I and some of the other people that work here at the Government Accountability Institute are clearly working in the wrong place, because we're over here fighting and stealing logins to save some scratch. Right, and these guys got tens of thousands of extra software licenses. Like, can we get some of that?
Yeah. I tell you,
it's our tax dollars paying for it.
One company that is not upset with the federal government is, because you can guarantee if the federal government has Netflix accounts, they're not sharing them, right? Every single one has it.
Ironically, but they are chilling at home. So, it's just kind of how it goes. But here's the thing. I hate to do this because it's going to paint you with this profound compliment, but you talked a couple of weeks ago about how the reaction to what's happening in terms of the cuts, because they are fast and furious and consistent, is you compared it to a body reacting to having surgery performed on it. Yeah. And I continue to think that is actually an excellent metaphor, because what you're doing is you're seeing the more you cut into this body budgetarily and programmatically, you're seeing all kinds of stuff that's not okay. It's cancerous, it's excessive, it's wasteful, and it needs to be removed. And so, there's no shortage of things we could talk about. But two examples have been in the news this week that we think kind of underscore the problem. There's so much money funneling into Washington, D.C., or funneling from Washington, D.C. You and I have talked repeatedly about the fact that when you were working in Washington in the 80s, one of my favorite all-time pictures of Peter Schweizer, by the way, is a picture of Peter and Ronald Reagan. Hopefully we can show it on this video. But you were there, and you talk about, what was your experience in Washington, D.C. at that time?
Yeah, I mean, in Washington, D.C. at that time, it was generally still a city, of course, with government workers. It was sort of upper middle class, but it had its fancy sections, but it was not flowing with cash. It's very, very different now.
I think the 4 wealthiest zip codes in the country, not around Silicon Valley, around Washington, D.C. 6 or 7 of the 10 wealthiest counties around Washington, D.C. I just heard this stat over the weekend, actually having dinner with some fancy lobbyist friends of mine who love this. Washington, D.C. has more 5-star Michelin restaurants than Paris.
Yeah, would not surprise me at all because there's so much money sloshing around. And the point that we made in the introduction, and the reason we use the term money laundering, is because this is, in fact, the most effective thing that DOGE is doing. Axios, we quoted them earlier, saying that, the DOGE is finding drops in the bucket for this mass ocean of debt. That is true when you look at the numbers. We are not going to be able to cut waste and flabbiness in the government and balance the budget. But what they're uncovering is the system by which the political class and very specific politicians, we're going to name some of them, are using our taxpayer dollars to feather their nests of their donors and their supporters, and they're effectively engaging in political money laundering. And that, I think, is the reason you're seeing so much screaming. It's not the mid-level employee at GSA that might lose their job. It's these very powerful, wealthy political figures who suddenly the slush fund is being shut down and being exposed.
And it's a two-way street, by the way. And actually, the guest host, Mark Simone, last time I did Sean Handy's radio show, he's the one that made this point, because there's the people who are used, their business model relies on taking this money, but then there's the elected officials whose job and their business model relies on giving out the money. And so if that money has gone away, we talked about the fact that it's almost like that scene in Office Space. I mean,
you physically take the specs from the customer?
Well, no, my secretary does that, or the fax.
So then you must physically bring them to the software people.
Well, no. Yeah, I mean, sometimes.
What would you say you do here?
I mean, Elon Musk is asking federal employees to respond to that email. Give me 5 things that you did this week. If you're a senator, if you're a staffer in D.C. and you don't have money to give out anymore, it's like, well, what exactly would you say that you do here?
Yeah.
Because that's what they've been doing. And by the way, just quickly, talk about if Axios is putting the DOGE cuts in the context of, well, is it really enough to balance the budget? Think about how the goalposts shifted so often when we had conversations about Joe Biden and Hunter Biden and his business dealings. It was, well, it did, was there anything unethical happen? Well, did Joe make money off of it? Well, did he know about it?
They
Well,
kept shifting the
did
goalposts.
they commit any crimes?
Right.
Now it's like, well, okay, is there actually that much waste? Well, is it enough to really balance the budget? Pretty soon it'll be like, well, is it enough to give everybody $5,000 and do that?
Yeah, exactly. And I think the purpose of DOGE's investigation really ultimately should be to name names and embarrass the political class for what they're doing. And you found this great example involving the Environmental Protection Agency. And this is sort of a common tactic in Washington, D.C., which is these government agencies, EPA, get these programs funded where they are going to offer grants, loans, and government assistance to either nonprofit organizations or corporations that happen to be just packed with people that helped them get elected in the first place.
So it's been in the news this week. You heard Stacey Abrams is linked to one of these groups called Power Forward Communities, which was formed way back in 2023. Like it literally records $100 worth of revenue one year, and then the next year the Obama EPA gives it $2 billion.
So they go from basically $100 in 2023 to $2 billion. That's some upscaling right there.
That is some upscaling. That's a very good Silicon Valley term. Maybe you do have a career in finance.
This kind of finance,
yeah,
I
but
could probably pull off.
But they literally got their IRS tax exemption 1 month before they get the $2 billion. And around the same time, or a couple months later, Joe Biden is embattled politically, and Stacey Abrams, who's again linked to this community, to this group, writes an op-ed, and she's saying, look, we need to stand with Joe Biden. And everybody's like, oh, look at Stacey Abrams, she's so brave. What wasn't disclosed is the fact that she's part of this group that's getting $2 billion from her EPA, from his EPA. Now, she's not the only one. The head of this group, you said you were familiar with this guy, is led by a guy named Timothy Mayopoulos. Now, here's somebody who's in charge of a group that just got $2 billion from the EPA. Would you think his background might be in solar energy?
Yeah, he's an engineer. He's an environmental scientist.
Weatherproofing. No, he is an Obama political official. He headed Obama's Fannie Mae.
Oh, boy.
From 2012 to 2018.
Which is a highly successful enterprise, right? Fannie Mae, no problems at Fannie Mae.
Okay, guys, we got a couple bill we got to kick around. Who should we give it to? Remember when Fannie Mae blew it? They learned their lesson, right? No, but that's literally what happened.
Give him another shot. Give him another shot.
So another group that got this, these guys make.
But let's go. I'm sorry. Before we get on the next one, the Stacey Abrams group.
Yeah.
What are they actually doing?
They're giving out money to other groups. So there's this thing that exists now called green banks, which is sort of not a real thing, but it's a term people invented. It's like, you give us money and then we're going to give it to other people in the name of weatherproofing or improving the environmental efficiency of low-income housing and things of that nature, which, hey, low-income housing, trust me, I used to live in a double-wide trailer. Our utility bill was high. I'm familiar with the concept of poor housing and, higher bill. So I understand that, but $2 billion. And by the way they're doing it, it's not just to who they're giving it to, but how they're doing it. The EPA Inspector General raised a lot of red flags about this back in the fall of 2023, gave testimony, and he said the way they've structured these awards are they have end dates. So they have to get rid of this money by a certain amount of time. And he's like, oh, by the way, they didn't give us anywhere near enough money to watch what they're doing. So literally, to quote from it, he says the risk for waste, fraud, and abuse from this specific program is way higher because there's just going to be no oversight. And so when you see DOGE hold up this as an example, in this case, I think it was actually the current EPA head who said, listen, this is not where it should be.
Yeah.
It's just consistent with what everyone from the inception of this program said would happen.
And this is why I call it political money laundering, because what's happening is they're taking our taxpayer dollars, they're giving this grant, I'll put that in quotation marks, to an organization that involves Stacey Abrams and a number of other politically connected people who, by the way, only are politically connected to the same political side as the Obama administration.
Yeah, Sean Donovan's another guy with Power Forward Communities. He's another Obama official.
Yeah, these are all Obama Biden officials. Some of them are donors. They raised money for Joe Biden. But what are they going to do? They get the $2 billion. They are then going to turn around and create more grants that they send to other nonprofits in California and other states. And what pool are they going to draw from there? They're going to draw from the same pool they're drawn from. This is sort of the laundering operation. In other words, instead of saying we're going to find engineers that are going to engage in a merit-based program, we're going to give it to some ex-politicians and ex-political appointees who are going to then transfer it to another entity with ex-politicians. And by the time it actually gets to the double-wide trailer, a huge portion of it, maybe 60, 70 cents on the dollar, has been taken up by these quote unquote nonprofits who are paying these fat salaries and consulting fees to these politically connected individuals.
That's literally exactly what happened to money in Haiti. And we'll talk about that as an example with a different government program in just a little bit. But you're exactly right. The money gets divvied up and dispersed into all these other political connections. Another group, just to your point about the Obama officials. And it reminded me actually of what you first reported and throw them all out, because back then we had the last financial crisis and we created all this money for shovel-ready projects. A lot of it went to green energy stuff. And you had the stat in there that blew me away. It was something like 85% of all the awards went to people that were Obama campaign bundlers, right?
Yeah. The Department of Energy under Obama sent out grants and government-backed loans for alternative energy projects. And we looked at those projects and found that 80% of the money went to projects where the lead investor was a member of the Obama Finance Committee for his reelection in 2012. So that's, again, this kind of laundering or recycling of money.
And by the way, the Power Forward Communities was one of the three groups that gets money from the EPA.
Yeah.
Coalition for Green Capital, they got $5 billion. Their CEO is a guy named Richard Kaufman. He used to work at the Department of Energy, where he oversaw their loan program.
Finally, an experienced hand, not in engineering, not in science, but in cashing.
And then the third group is called Climate United Fund. They got $6.97 billion. They make Power Forward look like the dang Gettysburg Address for as far how long they've been around. These guys just opened up shop in 2024. Their head is a lady named Beth Bafford, and she came from McKinsey, but she was an Obama regional field director. She works for the Obama management budget. Listen to other people on the board of directors.
Yeah.
You have the head of the Democratic Party of California and their state treasurer, a guy named Phil Angelides. The former Transportation Secretary Anthony Fox, and some union workers and people with the Congressional Black Caucus. So it's the same leftist groups. Notice none of them are scientists.
None of them are scientists, and none of them have any track records, because the groups literally just started I would argue, for the sole purpose of getting this government grant money. And so this is, again, why DOGE is so important. Don't let them, sort of deter you from thinking it's important work because, it's just a drop in the bucket. It is exposing this money laundering operation, and that's why we are going to do what we always do. We're going to name names, and we're going to call them out because they should be shamed and embarrassed. And most Americans, the vast majority of Americans, would look at this, and if they did it, they would feel shame for what they were doing. And so we need to call them out.
No, and I think we've successfully done that. Are there more people at the EPA you want to call out, or do you want to move on to the other government programs?
Let's move on to there's going to be plenty more at the EPA going forward, but let's move to another government agency. One of my favorites,
USAID.
Yes, USAID.
Now, you're the one that remembered this. I'm familiar with USAID and Haitian abuse, but you remember that there was actually and in Haiti, and we'll talk about that, the Clintons basically used USAID to help kind of hook up their benefactors for their nonprofit and people that paid Bill to give speeches while Haiti was, recovering from the earthquake. And there's a piece in the New York Post that got into more specifics about just how much money was squandered and how little the Haitian people and U.S. tax dollars got as a result of it. But the Clintons were the only people that benefit from USAID. You remembered that Hunter Biden actually had some USAID interactions in Ukraine.
Yeah, exactly. Remember in 2014, he joins the Ukrainian energy company Burisma, and that is happening just as his father is the point person on policy towards Ukraine. And he goes to Ukraine, Joe Biden does, with a USAID program to enhance natural gas production in Ukraine. And lo and behold, what is one of the companies that is in the natural gas production business? Burisma. Yeah. So again, always think of this in terms of not just waste, not just government inefficiency. Think of it in terms of political money laundering. Joe Biden is coming with a sweet benefit for people that are now paying his son, who has no qualifications in energy, and helping enrich the family. This is the way these government programs get abused and used for the political benefit of our political class.
It was called the Municipal Energy Reform Project in Ukraine. And the best part of this is when it was reported that Burisma had been a part of it when Joe Biden was vice president, then after the fact, they're kind of doing this audit, and everybody's like, it's weird. Like, we didn't sign off on this. Like, they must have just had a deal with somebody there, but none of the contract supervisors agreed to it. Yet somehow Burisma gets one of the awards months after Hunter gets added to their board of directors, in which he's being paid something like $85,000 a month. So that's one example. But my favorite, and because of the just size, scope, and sheer inefficiency and waste, is the Haitian example of USAID. There was a piece that was written in this week in the New York Post, in which they talk about just how much money was squandered. $1.5 billion dispersed for immediate humanitarian aid, $3 billion went to recovery. They're supposed to be doing all kinds of humanitarian work, supposed to be helping to rebuild. Of the $2 billion in contracts that went to Haiti-related work, only 2%, or 50 million, went to Haitian organizations or firms.
Right.
By comparison, 1.3 billion, or 56%, went to firms located near Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
And for that money, has a lot of stuff been built? That would be no, right? Like a few houses, and no one looks back at Haiti and what's happening to Haiti today. It's like, oh man, we crushed that.
Right.
It's clearly, you can draw, I think, a strong connection between the waste and squandering of what happened in the post-earthquake environment to the fact that they remain in this violent and dangerous atmosphere today.
Yeah.
And a lot of people made money, but the Haitians did not benefit at all.
Yeah, they didn't benefit at all. And by the way, I understand exactly what you're saying and talking about the waste in Haiti. But to me, waste doesn't quite explain what happened, right? Waste is something that you throw something out that you shouldn't throw out, or you're not as good with your money as you should be. In the case of Haiti, it was deliberate. It was intentional by the Bidens. Remember, the State Department, Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State, was in charge of the reconstruction dollars. USAID was under her purview. There were emails that came out where contractors and people who wanted deals in Haiti would email and talk to people, and Hillary Clinton's aides would contact Hillary Clinton and say, this person is an FOB, friend of Bill. Because many of the people that ended up getting Haitian contracts were people that were paying Bill Clinton for these large speeches, sometimes $500,000. And they were also making large donations, sometimes 7-8-figure donations to the Clinton Foundation, which, of course, Bill Clinton was drawing a lot of benefit from, too. So, again, it's money laundering. That's what they're engaging in. It's intentional. And the fact that very little trickled down to Haiti is a reflection of the fact that poor Haitians couldn't put money in the Clintons' pockets. That's why they never got paid.
In fact, when the Haitians were putting money in anybody's pocket, somehow the Clintons still got paid. And that's because they came up with this thing, and this is like the example. So it's called the Haiti Mobile Money Initiative. And this was a dual grant award from USAID and the Gates Foundation. So they funded basically a cell phone banking system. And so they decided that they announced in June of 2010 this initiative. The USAID says, hey, we're going to find a partner. We're trying to help with the recovery. Haitians don't like real banks, so they want to use their cell phones for banks. So in June of 2010, they announce this initiative. Now, it just so happens that there's a guy who runs a cell phone company in Haiti who is a very good FOB or friend of Bill. He's an Irish guy named Dennis O'Brien, and his cell phone company was called Digicel. And so in June, they announced this program. In September, Bill goes to Dublin to give a speech for Dennis O'Brien at this big castle. The next day, Digicel announces its intent to compete for this award, the Haitian Mobile Money Initiative. And in January, they announced the first recipient of an award for this Haitian Mobile Money Initiative. And who do you want to guess was the company that they picked?
I got to think. This is a tough one. Is it Digicel?
No, it was Nextel, actually. It was a bad investment. It's like me and the joy rate. No, it was actually Digicel. So they would actually go on to get more than $2 million from USAID for the Digicel Foundation. And so Digicel now becomes this partner when Haitians are using, and they had a food for aid program as well that use cell phones, and Digicel is heavily incorporated through USAID in the recovery efforts. By September of 2012, Digicel had been operating in Jamaica and a few other Caribbean countries. Haiti was the most profitable country for Digicel.
Unbelievable.
Right. And they continue to pay the Clinton Foundation and pay for a number of speeches for Bill.
Yeah.
And that's just one example of the way that USAID has been used and abused historically.
Yeah. So when you see these numbers and you hear about waste at USAID, it's not just waste. It's not just inefficiency. And I understand why they named DOGE what they named it. But again, it's about the intention to move money around for the benefit of your political allies, your political backers. Smart politicians don't take that money themselves because guess what? You're going to go to jail, right? If you're taking USAID money and you're pocketing it, you're going to end up like Jesse Jackson Jr. Remember, he went to jail because he was taking campaign dollars and decorating his house. Really bad idea. The smart but corrupt way to do it is, make money for a decorator and then have the decorator, in effect sponsor the decorations in your home. That's how you launder it. That's how you shift the money around. And that's what the Clintons have done. That's what the Bidens have done. That's what the Obamas have done. And we've got to watch because it also happens in Republican administrations as well. Although at least with Republicans, you get the talk about we need to curtail the size of government. Whether you do or not is another question. So that might deter them just a little bit. But this is a massive, major problem. We're going to stay on top of it, and we need to continue to expose it and show that it's not just numbers and it's not just waste.
I love that example. It's like the Jesse Jackson Jr. example is more tragic even than Haiti. It's like he didn't learn from his father. Like, Jesse, keep hope alive, but keep that front door shut.
Right.
It's like, damn, Jesse, you got a nice spread. Where'd you get all that stuff?
Yeah, that's why a lot of people will say to us sometimes, why does nobody go to jail? And that's because a lot of people in Washington, D.C. that do these things, they're very smart lawyers, and they know where the line is. It's in the old Tammany Hall days, they called it what? Legal graft.
Yeah.
It's legal graft. You figure out a way to do it so you are crossing the T's and dotting the I's, but you are basically manipulating and funneling that money through other entities. And it's a major problem. And so we're going to stay on top of this and continue to expose the sorts of things that DOGE comes up with so you can better understand what is actually going on here and why this stuff needs to come to a halt.
But I think in a positive way, and a really good news for America way, the fact is it's almost like they've normalized having these conversations now.
Yes,
The conversation has shifted from, can you believe all this crazy stuff they found, to now it's like, wait, how much are we wasting, and how does that compare to our actual budget deficit? And so we need to make $3 billion a day in savings. That's progress, I think. And again, back to the Mitt Romney campaign days, that's not a place we were as a country. We didn't take the issue seriously then. That seems to be changing. And I think that every time they hold up some crazy thing like the, diverse pest management stuff, it's less about that program and more about, so that's more money we've been wasting. And I think you hold up to the light and it's another 80-20 issue. No one's really going to defend that. And that's ultimately to the benefit of the savings of American taxpayer dollars.
I agree. And I think the other thing that's changed in this conversation is they use this sort of money laundering approach when it comes to sort of highly desirable goals, right? Who doesn't feel bad for the Haitian people? You spent time in Haiti after the earthquake and who doesn't feel bad for people that have been in that kind of situation? Who doesn't think that it would be great if we have a cleaner environment? So you purposely run these schemes into these highly desirable areas. And it used to be, if you questioned how Haitian aid was being spent, this happened when we wrote Clinton Cash. We had a whole chapter on this book. They attack you. You're just cruel and mean. You don't like Haitians. You're racist. That's not working anymore because people realize the game is up, and the real sick behavior here is by these political operatives who are funneling the vast majority of the money that's intended for people that are in need, and they're lining the pockets of their friends and allies. That's what's being called out. So that's another really, I think, encouraging sign of where our national conversation is.
Just to finish the point, USAID said in 6 years after the earthquake, with the Clintons in charge of the reconstruction, it built fewer than 1,500 homes, and many of those had to be redone because of poor workmanship. At the same time, the Clinton Foundation bragged that it facilitated the construction of a luxury hotel in Port-au-Prince that I stayed at that was also owned by Dennis O'Brien, this luxury Marriott.
Was it a nice hotel?
Well, it was nice. It was,
by Haitian standards, or nice?
It's like, look, man, you could be like a California 8, or you can be like a California 6, but like an Indiana 9, This bad boy was a Haitian 10. You still had to keep your mouth closed in the shower, though, because the water was no good. I mean, that's just how it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate you as always taking the time to listen. It's important to understand what your government is doing and what the real story is behind the headlines. That's what we try to do all the time. You can find out more about our research at thedrilldown.com, and you can subscribe to this podcast wherever you can find wonderful podcasts like ours. Thanks again. Until next time.